Clara Mendez was a top student at one of Sao Paulo's most prestigious universities, but her life was far from glamorous. She worked nights at a small cafe near the financial district to pay for books and rent. Despite her brilliance in economics and business strategy, she remained quiet and humble, often blending into the background. Her dream was to one day build her own consulting firm to help small businesses grow. One rainy evening, she unknowingly served coffee to one of Brazil's most powerful and feared CEOs. Leonardo Costa, known for his ruthless decisions and sharp tongue, barely glanced at her before dismissing her polite greeting. But Clara recognized him instantly. He was the subject of half her business case studies. She didn't know it yet, but that simple encounter would change both of their lives forever. Leonardo was furious when his driver failed to show, and he had to step into a small cafe to wait out the storm. He was used to private elevators and glass offices, not squeaky chairs and chipped mugs. Clara, despite recognizing him, treated him with the same kindness she gave every customer. She offered him a free refill when she noticed his suit jacket was wet. Intrigued by her calmness and her refusal to be impressed by him, Leonardo watched her work quietly. Her efficiency, grace, and quiet intelligence stirred something unfamiliar in him: respect. When she offered a sincere, "Good night, sir," as he left, he actually paused to look at her face. That moment, though fleeting, stuck with him long after he returned to his penthouse. The next morning, Leonardo couldn't focus during a board meeting. Clara's image, her eyes, her poise, her quiet dignity, kept interrupting his thoughts. He told himself it was nothing, just curiosity about someone different from the entitled socialites he dated. Yet, when he asked his assistant to find out who the girl at the cafe was, she raised an eyebrow. "Are you seriously asking me to track down a barista, sir?" she questioned, and he didn't like the judgment in her voice. Still, by noon, he had Clara's name and university credentials in a file on his desk. He was stunned to find her GPA was higher than his had ever been. Suddenly, he wasn't just curious, he was impressed. Meanwhile, Clara had no idea she'd made an impression on the country's most powerful businessman. She continued studying, working, and helping classmates who struggled with the material. When she saw an open internship at Costa Enterprises, she applied without expecting anything. It was a long shot, but the opportunity was worth the risk. A week later, she was shocked to receive an invitation to an interview. She dressed in her best second-hand blazer, heart pounding as she entered the skyscraper downtown. The lobby alone looked like something out of a movie. Marble floors, gold accents, and cold silence. Clara didn't know that Leonardo himself had personally selected her resume from over 1,000. Leonardo watched her enter the interview room through the security cameras, trying to pretend he wasn't interested. She sat straight, her eyes steady, her voice calm. His HR manager was tough, but Clara answered every question with clarity, humility, and insight. By the end, she had won over even the most skeptical executive in the room. Leonardo, trying not to seem obvious, asked for a copy of the interview recording. When he watched it alone in his office, he found himself smiling, genuinely. He hadn't smiled like that in months. The next morning, Clara received the offer, a 6-month internship starting immediately. On her first day, Clara was nervous but determined to do her best. She was assigned to the strategy department, directly under one of Leonardo's most demanding directors. The work was intense, endless reports, high expectations, late nights. But Clara thrived under pressure, and her ideas began turning heads within a week. Leonardo watched from afar, curious about how she would handle the pressure. To his surprise, she didn't seek attention or praise. She just worked hard, helped others, and kept her head down. It made her even more intriguing to him. A few weeks in, Clara was invited to present an analysis during a high-level meeting. She spent 3 nights perfecting her slides and rehearsing her delivery. When she entered the boardroom, her palms were sweating, but her voice remained steady. Leonardo was there, seated at the head of the table, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Clara spoke with clarity and passion, explaining a strategy that would save the company millions. For a moment, there was silence. Then, applause from the executives. Leonardo didn't clap, but he nodded slowly, meeting her gaze with a look she couldn't quite read. That night, he couldn't stop thinking about her voice. As the weeks passed, Clara and Leonardo began to interact more frequently. He asked for her input during meetings, sometimes challenging her ideas to test her. Clara never backed down, always responding with calm and reasoned arguments. She didn't flatter him or try to impress, she simply did the work. Leonardo started finding excuses to pass by her desk, to overhear her laugh or observe her focus. He told himself it was professional interest, but his glances lingered too long. Clara noticed his attention but didn't know what to make of it. She wasn't used to being noticed, especially by someone like him.
One evening, Clara stayed late finishing a report, and Leonardo happened to be the only other person still in the office. She nearly jumped when he appeared beside her, coffee in hand. "You work harder than most of my executives," he said.
Quietly. Clara smiled, unsure how to respond to such a rare compliment. They spoke for half an hour, the tension softening as they discovered mutual respect. She made him laugh with a story about spilled espresso on a customer's Rolex. He told her about his early struggles, something he rarely shared with anyone. That night, something shifted between them. Rumors began to circulate in the office about the CEO's growing interest in the intern. Clara tried to ignore them, focusing on her work and her studies. But Leonardo was no longer subtle. He started calling on her more often, praising her ideas in front of others. He invited her to a charity gala hosted by the company, claiming he needed someone who understood the numbers. Clara hesitated but eventually agreed, borrowing a simple dress from a friend. When she walked into the ballroom, heads turned, including Leonardo's. For the first time, he didn't see an intern. He saw a woman who had somehow captured his heart. Clara felt out of place at the gala, despite Leonardo's attempts to make her feel comfortable. He introduced her to high-profile investors, CEOs, and socialites, all of whom looked at her with a mix of confusion and quiet judgment. Clara smiled, politely, answered questions intelligently, and held her head high. Leonardo, noticing the whispers, gently touched her lower back, a subtle gesture of support. "You belong here more than they ever will," he murmured to her, his voice warm and low. Clara blushed, unsure how to respond to such sincerity from someone usually so guarded. As the night wore on, their conversation deepened, and the world around them faded. When he offered to drive her home, she hesitated, then accepted. During the drive, the silence between them wasn't awkward, it was electric. Leonardo asked about her family, and Clara revealed that she had lost her mother at 16 and had no contact with her estranged father. He listened without interrupting, genuinely moved by her strength. For the first time, he didn't see her as an intern or a student. He saw a woman shaped by resilience. When they reached her modest apartment, he stepped out to open her door. She thanked him, eyes lingering on his, and for a brief moment, it felt like the world stopped. But Clara, always cautious, stepped away with a soft good night. Leonardo watched her walk inside, conflicted. The next day, Clara tried to go back to business as usual, burying herself in reports. But something had shifted. Leonardo's presence lingered in her thoughts. Meanwhile, in the executive suite, Leonardo found himself staring at her employee photo longer than he should. His assistant, always sharp, finally asked, "Are you sure this isn't becoming personal?" Leonardo didn't answer. He didn't want to admit that this humble, brilliant woman had shaken the very walls he had built around his heart. But the more he denied it, the stronger it grew. Every email from her made him pause. Every meeting became something he secretly anticipated. It wasn't long before jealousy crept in. Clara began mentoring a junior analyst named Felipe, who clearly admired her more than just professionally. Leonardo watched their easy laughs and close teamwork with a cold expression. He called Clara into his office under the pretense of reviewing a proposal. Once alone, the tension was thick, and Clara sensed something unspoken beneath his calm tone. "Be careful who you spend time with," he said, almost protectively. Clara raised an eyebrow. Is that professional advice? Or something else? He didn't answer, and she walked out, heart racing. Clara couldn't ignore it anymore. Leonardo was falling for her, and she was falling too. She tried to resist, reminding herself of the power imbalance and the risks. But he made it hard when he started walking with her after meetings, bringing her coffee with a casual, "thought you'd like this," and defending her ideas passionately in the boardroom. One evening, after another long day, she found a handwritten note on her desk. It simply said, "Your mind is remarkable. Don't ever dim your brilliance for anyone, especially not for me." Clara held the note to her chest, overwhelmed. For someone like him, it was a confession. Things reached a boiling point during a business trip to Rio for a conference. Clara had been chosen to present alongside Leonardo, and they spent long hours preparing. Late at night, they stood on the balcony of the hotel, the ocean breeze softening the tension between them. Leonardo finally said what had been building for weeks. "Clara, I can't keep pretending I don't feel something for you." She turned, to him, eyes wide, voice barely a whisper. "Then stop pretending." He kissed her, slow, hesitant at first, then deep with longing. Neither of them slept much that night. The return to São Paulo was complicated. They avoided talking about what happened, unsure of the next step. Clara feared losing her internship, her reputation, everything she had worked for. Leonardo, on the other hand, was terrified of vulnerability. For the first time in years, he didn't feel in control. Gossip started again, fiercer this time. One jealous executive even filed an anonymous complaint about favoritism. Clara was called into HR, humiliated, and asked invasive questions. She denied any inappropriate relationship, and Leonardo, torn between protecting her and staying professional, did the same. But the damage was done. Clara decided to step away from the internship temporarily, citing personal reasons. Leonardo tried to stop her, but she insisted. "I need to protect my dignity," she told him, eyes wet but firm. He respected her decision, even if it tore him apart. During her absence, Leonardo found himself going through old messages, rereading her reports, missing her voice. Clara, meanwhile, focused on finishing her degree and avoiding the media storm surrounding the company. They were both miserable, but neither reached out. Pride kept them apart, and pain deepened in the silence. Months passed and graduation approached. Clara received multiple job offers, none from Costa Enterprises. One afternoon, as she walked out of her final exam, she found Leonardo waiting outside. He looked tired, different, and less arrogant than before. "I don't care about the company, the board, or what people say," he told her. "I care about you, and I'm tired of hiding it." Clara stood frozen, a mix of love and fear in her chest. "I never stopped caring," she whispered. He reached for her hand, and this time, she didn't pull away. They met at a quiet cafe far from downtown to talk things through. For the first time, everything was on the table. Feelings, regrets, fears. Leonardo admitted he had spent years building walls around himself and that Clara had knocked them down without even trying. Clara confessed she had loved him since the first time he listened to her without judgment. They agreed to take things slowly, to protect each other and their future. "No more hiding," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Clara smiled, tears glistening. The arrogant CEO and the brilliant student had found something rare, love grounded in truth. Clara and Leonardo began seeing each other quietly, away from the corporate spotlight. He respected her boundaries and admired her independence more each day. They spent weekends walking in public parks, reading in silence, or debating ideas, late into the night. Slowly, Leonardo softened. His temper lessened, and his sharp arrogance gave way to genuine humility. Clara saw not the tycoon, but the man beneath the suit, thoughtful, lonely, and deeply wounded. He, in turn, found in her something he had never known: peace. Their love grew not from luxury or passion alone, but from deep respect. Still, they knew the world would not stay quiet for long. Rumors began swirling again when Clara was spotted entering Leonardo's penthouse. Online gossip sites speculated about a CEO romance scandal, and the media camped outside her apartment. Clara faced criticism from classmates, former colleagues, and strangers online. She considered walking away to protect her future, her name, her dream. But Leonardo wouldn't let her face it alone. He called a press conference and, to the world's shock, announced their relationship. "She is not a scandal," he said firmly. "She is my partner, and I'm proud to stand beside her." Clara, watching from home, cried. The news exploded. Some investors were outraged, but many respected Leonardo's honesty. Clara received interview requests, sponsorship offers, and even invitations to speak at women's business panels. Still, she declined most, choosing instead to focus on her goal, launching her own firm. Leonardo backed her but refused to fund it himself. "You've earned this," he said. "I want you to prove it, to yourself and to the world." Clara appreciated that more than any donation. She found 2 former classmates and built her team from the ground up. "We start small," she said, "but we dream big." As Clara's startup grew, so did her confidence. She helped small family-run businesses restructure and thrive, just like she had always dreamed. Leonardo remained supportive but distant in her professional world, respecting her space. They lived in separate homes, choosing independence over dependence. Friends found their relationship odd, but it worked for them. They were partners, not in business, but in life. Their love was quiet, mature, and fiercely loyal. And through every up and down, they chose each other again and again. One evening, while watching the sunset from a cabin retreat, Leonardo finally opened up about his past. He spoke of a father who never hugged him, a mother who died too young, and the years he spent believing emotions were weakness. Clara listened, her hand over his heart, saying nothing. "You changed everything," he whispered. "I used to think I had to control everything to feel safe. But with you, I finally learned to let go." That night, he asked her to stay with him, not just for a night, but for a lifetime. And for the first time, Clara didn't hesitate. They announced their engagement 6 months later. The internet exploded again, this time with admiration. The former arrogant CEO marrying a girl from the suburbs who had worked her way up on pure brilliance? It felt like a fairy tale, one grounded in reality. Their wedding was private, in a vineyard in the countryside with only 20 guests. Clara wore a simple white dress, and Leonardo cried when she walked down the aisle. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, full of laughter and quiet promises. No gold, no glamour, just love. Married life brought its own challenges. Clara traveled often for her company, and Leonardo had to learn patience. He no longer expected her to drop everything for him. Instead, he learned to cook her favorite meals for when she returned. Clara, in turn, helped him rebuild relationships with people he had once shut out, including his estranged younger brother. Their home became a place of warmth and learning. Books, coffee, and soft music filled the air. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Years passed, and Clara's firm expanded across Latin America. She became a respected figure in business, admired, not just for her intelligence, but for her integrity. Leonardo, too, evolved. Less feared, more respected, and often citing Clara's influence in interviews. They began mentoring young entrepreneurs together, especially those from underprivileged backgrounds. "We know what it's like to start from the bottom," Clara would say, "and we believe in second chances." Their love became a foundation for others, not just a private story. One spring morning, Clara discovered she was pregnant. The news overwhelmed her. Joy, fear, hope, all at once. Leonardo was speechless, then fell to his knees and kissed her belly. They prepared slowly, savoring the moment, balancing work and rest. Their son was born during a rainy night, just like the evening Clara had first served him coffee. They named him Lucas, a name that meant light. As she held her child, Clara whispered, "We've come so far." Leonardo, standing beside her, knew she wasn't just talking about the baby. Years later, Clara would look back on that girl in the cafe and barely recognize her. But one thing had never changed. her belief that kindness, humility, and brilliance could open any door. Leonardo, once cold and arrogant, now spent mornings making breakfast and watching cartoons with Lucas. Their love had endured storms, rumors, pride, and pain, and it had won. Together, they had rewritten the rules of power and love. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And in each other, they had found not just love, but home.